Have you ever heard the brutal story of America's most famous mansion? Well, you've probably heard about Mar-a-Lago, and today we will uncover the whole story behind it, not just politics, but the real history. This story is maybe a bit different than the other stories so far, and that's because this time, the main character in our story is a woman. So, when Marjorie Merriweather Post chose a quiet strip of land in Palm Beach in 1924, stretching from the ocean to the lake, she didn't see swampy ground or empty sand. Actually, she saw something that could survive her. Marjorie's life had already been shaped by loss. In fact, her father C.W. Post, the man who built the food empire that made her one of the richest women in America, had died suddenly in 1920, leaving her not only a fortune, but also a huge responsibility. Moreover, overnight, wealth became both a gift and a burden, which gave her freedom, but also left her searching for something that couldn't disappear the way people do. So, for her, Mar-a-Lago became that answer. But the story of Mar-a-Lago did not begin with a big celebration, because it began with death. Ironically, one of the first ships carrying materials for the mansion never reached the Florida shore. It sank at sea, taking its cargo with it. Nevertheless, work continued, as it always does when wealth is involved, but the tone had already shifted. Ultimately, a house that was meant to defy time had begun with something vanishing completely, and it felt like a warning no one wanted to name, but no one truly forgot. So from the very beginning, Mar-a-Lago carried the quiet truth that beauty and tragedy often exist together, and that ambition rarely arrives whole. The house still rose piece by piece, but it seemed to absorb that early loss, holding it quietly within its walls. But what happened next? Eventually, when Mar-a-Lago was completed in 1927, it did not feel like a home at all. In fact, it felt like a declaration. These 58 bedrooms, endless halls, and courtyards are designed to impress rather than comfort. It looked like this was a house that was actually meant to be admired, but not to be lived in. Almost right from the beginning of Mar-a-Lago, Marjorie hosted lavish parties where Palm Beach's elite gathered beneath chandeliers, where invitations themselves became symbols of social power. Naturally, to be welcomed into Mar-a-Lago was to be acknowledged as someone important, someone seen. But beneath the music and spectacle was a deeper intention, because Marjorie didn't want Mar-a-Lago to fade when the lights went out. Actually, she wanted it to serve America itself. As such, she imagined presidents walking its halls, foreign leaders dining beneath its arches, and core history unfolding inside her own walls. Even at that stage, the idea felt slightly off, as though the house was meant to serve more than a home ever should. Later on, as decades passed, Mar-a-Lago slowly became a complication. Over time, it was too large to be loved, too expensive to be practical, and too symbolic to ignore. However, Marjorie Merriweather Post aged, and with her, the house began to feel like a house with no clear role. Eventually, when she died in 1973, she did something many couldn't believe. She gave Mar-a-Lago to the United States government, trusting her long-held vision would finally come true. In Marjorie's mind, the house would become a winter White House, useful and official rather than private. But the government, however, saw a financial and logistical burden, since it was expensive, difficult to secure, and hard to maintain. Unfortunately, one by one, administrations rejected it, so Mar-a-Lago was left behind, despite everything Marjorie had imagined it would become. So for a long stretch it remained beautiful, but hollow inside. Time moved forward, but Mar-a-Lago remained frozen, its halls echoing with memories of parties long over. Over the years, Palm Beach evolved, wealth shifted, and the house became a burden rather than a prize. Surprisingly, this part of the story is often skipped, but it matters more than people realize, because this is the moment when Mar-a-Lago began to change in tone. Apparently, staff and caretakers later spoke of how the mansion felt different during those years. Too quiet for its size, its long corridors echoing in ways that felt almost unnatural. The house was not abandoned, but it felt forgotten. Though it had lost its place, the house had not lost its appeal. Someone saw more than decay inside its walls. As many of you presume, that person arrived in the mid-1980s, and he did not see history or architecture or failed dreams, but leverage. Donald Trump purchased Mar-a-Lago for a fraction of what it cost to build, acquiring not just land and stone, but a legend that could in fact be reshaped. But something worth mentioning is that Marjorie Merriweather Post filled Mar-a-Lago with art and objects collected over a lifetime. She acquired European antiques, rare furniture, tapestries, sculptures, and decorative pieces meant to give the house a sense of age and importance. And when the estate eventually changed hands decades later, much of what remained inside came with it. The house, along with its contents, passed to Donald Trump, leaving behind a collection worth from $20 million to $50 million. But his restoration was not about preservation, but about branding. Eventually, Mar-a-Lago became louder, more polished, more performative. So in 1995, it transformed into a private club, exclusive by design, separating those who could enter from those who could only look from behind gates. Even though wealth was returned to its halls, it was different now because Trump didn't want to bring back old-fashioned dreams. For him, this was access, status, and spectacle. Just like that, the mansion once meant to serve the nation now served membership fees and influence. When Trump became president in 2016, Mar-a-Lago's original dream resurfaced most unexpectedly. Without official designation, it became a winter White House, just like Marjorie wanted, but it remained private in every legal sense. But the story doesn't end here. In those days, as Mar-a-Lago grew closer to the center of national attention, so did uncomfortable connections from the past resurface. Once, Donald Trump publicly acknowledged that he once knew Jeffrey Epstein, later claiming their relationship ended after Epstein recruited young women who worked at the Mar-a-Lago spa. According to Trump, he warned Epstein to stop and cut ties once those boundaries were crossed. So the comments surfaced years later as questions intensified about who knew what and when. Still, Trump was never charged in connection with Epstein's crimes. The association added another layer of unease to the mansion's story, binding it once again to secrecy and controversy. That sense of scrutiny deepened in August 2022, when the FBI executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago itself. Naturally, federal agents entered the property looking for classified government documents believed to be improperly stored after Trump left office. By then, the estate was transformed from a symbol of luxury into the focus of a criminal investigation. Mar-a-Lago had become a place where the past, the personal, and the political collided openly under the nationwide focus. Today, the mansion remains preserved and protected, carrying a complicated legacy. It shows that buildings themselves are neutral, and what gives them meaning are the people who control them. At the end of this story, Mar-a-Lago has shaped many lives, shaped by the people who owned it and the power that passed through its rooms. What do you think this mansion truly represents today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this story interesting, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. Cheers.